we have many branches. And each one of them is a branch of Al-Haqq, the branch of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the branch of truth, the branch that tells us something about Yawm al-Qiyamah, the branch that tells us something about the presence of Allah in the abode of Haqq, the branch that tells us something about justice, which is the cement that holds human affairs together, the branch that tells us something about rights and responsibilities. If you study rights and responsibilities, it takes you in the direction of Sharia. If you study justice, it takes you in the direction of politics and sociology and interpersonal relations. If you study the names of Allah, it takes you in the direction of tasawwuf, because only the heart knows the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the next 15 minutes, this khutbah will share some insights about science, the physical aspects of Al-Haqq. هو الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بالحق. He it is who created the heavens and the earth in Haqq. That should have given us a conduit, a way, a methodology for connecting the created world with the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But unfortunately, humankind has gone off in a different direction. If you look at mankind today, it is lost. It does not know where it belongs. It's dangling between the heavens and the earth. The secular perspective is pushed and pushed hard, so much so that so many young people who enter great universities come out all confused. Humankind, on the one hand, stands at the door of unsurpassed discoveries. We have gone to the moon. We're exploring the stars. We even speculate on the possibilities of other universes. Unparalleled progress in space. On the other hand, at the micro level, we have broken the messages within cells. We know what DNA is and how it is transmitted, and humankind is tinkering with it so as to proceed from being human to transhuman. Namely, humankind wants to surpass itself by transplanting little small chips. They wish to communicate with the neurons to somehow augment performance in a certain way or control the behavior of human beings. Mankind is lost. It started with a description, an assumption that people made, humankind made about itself, that mankind was nothing but its material self, the material concept of man. From there evolved many fallacies. The fallacy that mankind was nothing but behavior which could be controlled. The fallacy that mankind was nothing but its free will, which comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I forgot that. And now, they postulate that mankind is nothing but big data. That you can program people to behave in a certain way. Now, mankind has destroyed the environment. All you have to do is to go to big cities like Cairo or Delhi. You can hardly breathe. There are rivers that catch fire. There are lakes that foam. There are ships, when you slit open their bellies, you find nothing but plastics. mankind is lost. And in this kind of a situation, in this context, what is the message of the Qur'an? And that is what this khutbah briefly will touch upon, especially for the young people. Those who are asked the tough questions, the questions that ordinary people don't ask, for which most of the people do not give answers because they don't know. They don't know science, they don't know history, and most importantly, they have stopped studying the Qur'an. It's all there in the Qur'an. What is the message of the Qur'an? Just by way of context, let's take a historical detour. Let's go back to the beginning of the 8th century, at the time of Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam al-Azam, Imam Abu Hanifa. One of the greatest of mujtahideen, which comes from the word ijtihad, which means a rigorous intellectual exercise to apply the principles of the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet to find solutions to the problems that you face. That is ijtihad. And this brief presentation is also to invoke the principles of ijtihad as it applies to science. The beginning of the 8th century was a very exciting period. On the one hand, Islam had entered into what is today Pakistan, Sindh, and Multan, ancient India. On the other, Islam had made inroads into Spain and southern France. The Islamic domains extended all the way from the Pyrenees Mountains in France to the Indus River to the east, and it was rubbing shoulders with the empire of China. In 719, when Umar Abdul Aziz became the Khalifa, and thanks to his initiatives and what he did, people in Iran and Egypt accepted Islam. Up until the time, Iran was not Islamic. Up until the time, Egypt was not Islamic. It was in the time of Umar bin Abdul Aziz, between 719 and 721, that these countries became Islamic. So, Imam Abu Hanifa, who was born in the year 700, circa 700, when he was a young man, he lived in exciting times in the city of Kufa. Kufa was a melting pot, very much similar to America is today, or New York City is today. A melting pot wherein you found Hindus who had recently become Muslims, people from the subcontinent, Zoroastrians who had come into Islam, the Iranians, the Turks who were gradually coming into the fold of Islam, the Arabs who were mostly in the army and the cantonments, the Greeks who were previously Christian, all of them came into the fold of Islam, and it was a melting pot of ideas. Imam Abu Hanifa, the great mujtahid that he was, applied the principles of the Qur'an to find solutions facing the people of the day. And his fiqh, and this Imam follows the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa. And his fiqh was the most comprehensive of all fiqhs. It entailed a study of the Qur'an where the principles were obvious from the Qur'an, apply the Qur'an. Where there is no guidance from the Qur'an or it's only implied, follow the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Where there is no guidance from either the Qur'an or the Sunnah of the Prophet, look to the example of the Sahaba. Ijma. And Imam Abu Hanifa said that even the ijma of a few of the Sahaba is sufficient. And then the principle of qiyas, by analogy, and istihsan, that which is good for people, which is applied by Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu during his domain. All of these principles he came up with, and the methodology was something that was amazing for his day and age. He did not give any fatwas the way it is given these days. Everybody is a faqih and you can see the fatwas coming out left and right all over the place. Imam Abu Hanifa would constitute two teams of scholars who were all his students. And he would put a proposition before them. And one was to go for the proposition, the other was against the proposition. The dialectic method, which was not introduced into Europe up until the 19th century. And until there was a meeting of the minds that he did not accept the verdict. That was the process, the methodology, the greatness of Imam Abu Hanifa. So what happened? The greatness. Certainly, the same methodology, similar methodology with modifications was used one generation later by Imam Malik, two generations later by Imam Shafi'i, and 4 generations later by Imam Hanbali. And there was at the same time a concurrent development in the Shia fiqh. Concurrent. What happened? Very briefly, historically, this is for the young people. This presentation is about the inclusion of science in the Sharia. What happened was Muslims came across and brushed many different philosophical and political events during their course from the 8th century till today. Very briefly, the first brush was with Greek philosophy. They adopted it, they found it was insufficient, inadequate, abandoned it. But that brush left them bruised because in subsequent centuries, even in the classical golden period of Islam between the 8th and the 12th century, the scholars had to look over their shoulders to make sure that they did not in any way annoy the usuli ulamas. The second brush was in the 13th century. It was physical as well as ideological. It was physical from the east, from the Mongol devastations. Half of the Islamic world destroyed. It was physical from the west, from the Crusaders. Spain was lost. And it was ideational. It was the 13th century that Europe translated the works from Arabic into Latin, and they came up with the proposition that science and religion were separate. They did it because they could not accommodate their belief in the Trinity, in the rational approach that they were inheriting from the Arabs. 13th century. And then Europe took off in a certain direction in the 16th century, the so-called Renaissance, and then the 18th and the 19th century until today. On the other hand, the Muslims recoiled from within. In the 13th century, by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Islam triumphed thanks to the intervention of the awliya. Tasawwuf saved the day. In 1222, Baraka Khan accepted Islam, and after that the Mongols accepted Islam. They became the standard bearers. But ideationally, the Islam that was practiced after the 13th century was qualitatively different. It was looking inwards to the soul. And you find the presence of great awliya. Until the 18th century, to be more specific, if you want to put a date, 1684. The same year that Newton published his laws of motion, Islam retracted further. It went from taqwa to fatwa. That was the year Futuwat-e-Alamgiris were published in India, which was at that time by far the richest and the most powerful of states on the planet, controlling about 30% of the GDP of the world. Then came the Westerners. It is not a description of history or West or the East. I'm just letting you know what happened in terms of the dissociation of science from the Qur'an. The West, when it occupied Asia and Africa, instituted the age of discontinuity. Whatever we had developed was discontinued. That brings us to the modern day. Muslims have adopted the assumptions that the West has made about science and religion. The Sharia includes science. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens and the earth in truth. Truth is inherent in His creation. Inna fi khalqis samawati wal earth la ayatil liqawmin ya'qilun. I'm paraphrasing. In the creation of the heavens and the earth, there are signs for people of Aql. Aql could mean as simple as common sense, could mean rational thinking, could mean the thinking of the heart, the feelings of the heart, or it could mean the intellect. For people of intellect, Allah gives us signs in the universe so that through them we get closer to Him. One way we can put science back into our lexicology, in our approach, is to show and assume and believe and follow that science is a compendium of signs. Be scientists. That's my advice to the young people. Be great scientists. But know that science does not tell you the truth. Science is not al-haq. Science is a sign. It's a process. It leads you towards the truth. A very simple example. Let's consider water, the giver of life. We all know that life comes from water. And we know that there is hydrogen and oxygen in it. And those who teaches the theory of evolution, a theory that ethically is repugnant and logically does not make sense, that is thrust with such vehemence upon everyone, they say that life somehow evolves from one genre to the other. Ask yourself, water, where did all this water come from? Oceans upon oceans of water in the world. What processes took place to bring water into this niche, the world that is located in a small bandwidth within the solar system, which in turn is in a small bandwidth within our galaxy, which in itself is within a bandwidth within bandwidth within bandwidth. How much, if you are studying statistics, what are the odds of this happening except the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? No, they don't have explanations. They talk about Big Bang. Who was there standing at the time of the Big Bang holding a clock, a watch? Was anyone there? What was there before the Big Bang? Was there time before the Big Bang? They don't have answers, and yet these theories that thrust upon you with a vehemence that is unimaginable, so that even those who believe when they enter a university come out not believing in it. This is what has happened to secular man. Mankind is lost. We can go on and on. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to look at the birds. It says, look how the birds fly with the wings spread out and the wings folded. There are birds that fly 8,000 miles. From the North Pole to New Zealand, 8,000 miles, a bird that weighs only a few grams without stopping. And it's only now, with the advent of long distance travel with the airplanes, that we know how to go from Singapore to San Francisco, 8,000 miles. How is it possible? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to study them. Every bird is different. Every bird is a perfection of aerodynamics. If you want to study the quill and apply the principles of aerodynamics, you will see that each one is different. In a couple of months, you will go to the desert, the dates come out, the crops of desert, the dates that we eat. Did you know that each date has a thumbprint that is different from each other? Just like the thumbprint that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. Each date is different. And the evolutionists would want us to believe that somehow it all came out happened. Absurd. And yet it's trust. Study the Qur'an. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, look at His signs. It describes the creation of human beings. The creation, how it evolves in the mother's womb. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our mothers. From their wombs on to becoming a full adult and in old age. Gives us guidance. This guidance has to be applied knowing that the Qur'an gives us signs. History is a sign. It is not a compendium of who did what to whom, who conquered who. No. Sign. What can be learned from history so that we can use its principles for what? To discharge our responsibility, so that we can discharge our responsibility to serve Him, to know Him. Science is within the Sharia. That is the message for the young people today. I want you to study the Quran, note down all the ayahs wherein Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us. What has happened to the development of fiqh is that it took a direction of application to human relations. Alhamdulillah. But is somehow veered off, applying the principles of the Sharia to natural science. If we had done it, we would not have made the mistakes that the Mutazilis did. Even the greats, Ibn Khaldun, even the greats, Imam al-Ghazali, even the greats, those who wrote tafsirs of the Quran, sometimes because of the fact that we took this detour, make mistakes. We need to go back to the Quran. We need to go back to the source. We need to go back to the Sunnah of the Prophet. We need to go back to the principles and put the genie back in the bottle. Genie back in the bottle. Destiny calls us. Islam is not a religion to be ashamed of, to hide, to run away from because of all the things that they say. Because of Islamophobia or the difficulties that Muslims face in the world all the way from Myanmar to Tripoli in Libya. No, let us not be distracted, confused by the smoke that surrounds the Islamic world. This kind of initiative, putting the genie in the bottle, putting science within the confines of the Sharia, the development of the Sharia, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to come from the East. The nations of the East are bogged down by internal dissension and foreign intrigue. No, the sun that used to rise from the East is not rising from the East anymore. So let the sun rise from the West. Let it rise from the West, from you, the young people here, who study science. So many of you are in IT. So many of you have studied so many different subjects. Let it rise from here. Go to the source. Study the Quran and show the world that yes, indeed, Islam will somehow mollify the jagged edges of human civilization. That it will show the way to a mankind that has lost its way. No. Humankind did not come from the monkeys. No. Humankind is not just his material self. No. Humankind cannot be controlled by data, big data, no matter how much data, how many computers. No. Humankind was created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His ruh inside and outside, so that through the ruh we know Him and aspire to the very heavens, to the very seat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is our destiny. That is our goal. Show the world that that is so. Do not accept the distractions of modern man. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulil Kareem. Inna Allaha wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. Sallu alayhi wa sallimu tasliman. The subject matters are broad. The oceans are deep. But as Maulana Rumi said, you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in the drop. So take a dive into the ocean. The ocean, which is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is Al-Haqq. Only Allah is the truth. Science is not the truth. Only the word of Allah is the truth, not science. It's all relational. Science is good. It's beautiful, cultivating. It gives us the means for our falah, for our goodness, for our well-being. It is good. It is good to be rich, so you can serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As was Imam Abu Hanifa. He was a millionaire by his age, a silk merchant. He was an architect. He knew standards. He knew heat transfer. He knew tasawwuf. Of course, he knew the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet. That is what we have to keep as our models. Let us pray. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma ansurna nasran aziza. Waftah lana fathan qariba. Allahumma ijlana min ladunka waliya. Allahumma ijlana min ladunka sultanan nasira. واكتب الصحة والسلامة والعفو والعافية والنصرة علينا وعلى الحجاج والزوار والغزاة والمجاهدين والمقيمين والمسافرين في برك وبحرك وجوك من أمة محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم أجمعين والسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم ما تصنعون وأقيموا الصلاة.